Hello and welcome to my channel. Well, I was just thinking about how Bowie knives um, had their had their had their time when they were really popular, and then they kind of faded away, but always remained popular, but not as popular at one time, and that time was the 1800s, basically. Earlier than the 1800s, yes, but I mean, really, after the Civil War, when people started heading out west, uh, that's when these became popular, and it was because of a time in the evolution of basically of self-defense type of weapons. Until the pistol arrived, the the and self-contained cartridges. A firearm, yeah, it had advantages like long range and especially if it was rifled, accuracy and everything. But they were slow. They were slow to reload, And when metallic cartridges started coming up, things got a little bit more reliable because it wasn't as susceptible to moisture. You had a lot of misfires and stuff back then. You could pull the trigger and get a click or a fizzle, and nothing would happen. And that's why knives were always popular as a backup. Um, they never run out of ammo. They have no consumables. You don't have to get black powder for them or fine flint or any of the stuff like that. And once metallic cartridges started happening, you could reload on your own. But mostly people just started buying stuff. I guess I'm not a historian on this. I'm just from what I've seen and everything. So I think the reason why is because uh, these basically evolved. There were a lot of different Bowie knife shapes. Some were stiletto, some look like bayonets and everything. But this is what most people think of, as the shape of a Bowie knife and what they would look like. And the reason is because of where they're being used. I think frontier, primitive areas. If you think about it, when humans get into an area, they start restricting things. Even in Tombstone, it was getting too crazy with gunfire and people getting drunk and stuff. So they started having people check their firearms. That's a whole, in theory, that in a lot of movies and stuff. That's the whole thing behind the OK Corral was, they were carrying guns, and that was going to be their excuse to hassle them. There was a lot more going on in real life between those two factions. But anyway, uh, as civilization starts evolving, if you look at any like pristine area, let's say like 1,000 acres of like wildlife, a forest or a park or something like that, put in 1,000 people or more in there and see how that area changes. Well, most of the resources are going to get consumed up. The nice pristine area is going to be blotted with, houses and stuff like that a lot of times don't blend in with nature, but, just stand out. A glaring, example. Here, we're here, and we're going to take over. And then laws start getting passed and restrictions, and one of the things they restrict a lot of times is the size and the length of the knife, because it's no longer a frontier. You don't have to defend yourself against wild bears and Indians and stuff like that. You don't have to hack through forest or these things can be used as like an emergency shovel if you have to, uh, a hatchet, a skinning thing, all kinds of stuff, self-defense, all of that. And I think civilized societies don't want to be reminded of how they got there. They don't want to see people packing anything. They want to rely on um, a police force to protect them so that they don't have to go around armed all the time. And it is a big advantage to not have to carry. I worked at a pistol range for many many years, and every day I had to carry a gun with me. I had to pack one, and yeah, they're heavy. They're kind of annoying, sometimes. You'd like to not have that around, but who are you going to rely on to protect yourself is basically what it comes down to. Do you want somebody that you have to call and maybe they're busy or we'll get there as soon as we can? Or do you want to rely on yourself? It's an inherent right of human beings, no matter what their country or everything else is, to defend yourself if you're attacked with whatever means possible. And cutting tools have always been used, offensively and defensively. And to stigmatize them just because of their shape and their look and their appearance, these knives are not going to hurt you as long as you're not hurting the person carrying them or trying to. If somebody's carrying one of these knives and you're attacking them or whatever, you've got a right, to defend yourself. You don't have a right to go offensively, then you have to. We go through things. You have to be given permission to do that. Like you're a peace officer, or you're in the military. And under these conditions, we allow you to do this. But as a regular person, you don't have that right to just go out and attack whomever for whatever reason. But you do have a right to defend yourself. So I know I don't want to harp on this or but in a lot of countries they've limited that. They said, all right, you know what? Because of the length of the blade and because of these things are too scary, you're not even allowed to own these things. Sometimes you're allowed to own them, but you only in your house, which is still, don't pass up. This is a Sesco Bowie. Of course, this is the case, and this is the Ontario SP10. They have that classic Bowie shape. Some work with more of the guard, and less. And sometimes it's curved, and you can get D handles. But they're fun knives. It's kind of like, pit bulls getting stigmatized all the time. Oh, they'll just go off, and they'll just attack for no reason. Usually a pit bull was being abused, and that's why they did that. But, they get a reputation, and they get banned. Sometimes you can't even have them. No, this breed of dog is just too bad. It's what was the dog bred for and why. A lot of times, I'm getting, out on a limb here, on knowledge and everything, but a lot of times pit bulls were bred for fighting, fighting dogs. A lot of times that's popular, especially here in Texas. It used to be cockfighting, rooster fighting, which is illegal, and dog fighting. They're bloody. It's cruel to the animals and stuff like that, but it's always been a popular thing for people to get drunk and place bets and stuff like that. It's a cultural thing. It's really popular with some cultures. But getting back to the knives, the reason why Bowie knives are banned is because the reason why they got popular was the original story got carried along, of the sandbar fight, and boom, sheesh, everybody wanted one. They thought if they had one of those, they would be able to withstand being shot and stabbed and everything else, and the Bowie knife would pull them out of it. No, it has more to do with the person than the weapon they're wielding, but still, I wanted to just just ramble on, basically, just tell you that's what I thought. Basically, as civilization starts evolving, they start restricting things. They don't want to be reminded of their past, And now, oh, yeah, you can have a Bowie knife now. Yes, yes, this is legal. You can carry this Bowie knife now. There you go. Are you happy? You got your nostalgia. It's got a safe cutting edge. There you go. There's your Bowie knife. Aren't we civilized? And yet crime still goes on, and it's always the people that don't obey laws that are gonna still use whatever, you know. Uh, I think the most used knife in crimes is a kitchen knife. It's not any of these specialized knives and stuff like that. It's always been a kitchen knife. Why? Because they're available, they're accessible, and 6 or 7 inch kitchen knife. The original Bowie knife, from all accounts, was basically a big butcher blade knife. More like something like this. Probably not this long. Maybe a 10 inch. I think this is a 14 inch. But yeah, its length of blade gives you some reach, but as you increase the length of the blade, it makes it a lot harder to carry on you. But if you know you're going into a situation, having a machete would be better than having one of these if you know how to use this. If you commit to a swing with one of these and you miss, it's going to be harder to recover and come back, just because of momentum, but you have longer reach. Anyway, the whole thing behind this is I haven't carried the Bowie knives as much this year as I did last year, and they're still good. They're still something that you can just pick up, except for this. This doesn't feel like a Bowie knife. It looks like one. It just doesn't feel like one. This feels like one. This feels like one. Now, the thing about this one, I blued. It's a Sezco Bowie. I blued it. I store them in the sheath, so that's never usually a good idea, because it's what kind of tanning leather do they use, and there's moisture in there. It can get corrosion. Yeah, but yeah, I don't always do what I know is best for these. You can store them in separate things, but then I'd be separating the knife from the sheath, and I already have a problem with losing stuff, misplacing things, and yeah, I don't keep it super shiny. But yeah, I like all the knives. This would be more like a practical one. If you're wanting to just pack one around and be practical. They have gone up in price. This used to be a good in-between one. It was less money than a case, but more money than a Sezco. And of course, these are sleepers. These used to be sleepers, these big old butcher knives, because they do multi-purpose. These are a lot like the original, the pioneers. If you think about it, they used a lot of what was known as like Green River knives, and they were basically just kitchen knives. Just basically different blade lengths of kitchen knives. And yeah, if it works in a kitchen, it can work out in the woods a lot of times. A lot of times kitchen knives, they're not as thick of a blade and everything. This one's got pretty thick blade stock to it, but still, I've rambled on long enough. I was just thinking about that, how as our western frontier stopped becoming a frontier, these things started fading out. Now, of course, also handguns and stuff were evolving to be more reliable, so the need for one of these, reduced a lot. But for the longest time, it's just like habit. People still carried knives, and to this day, a lot of times, now they're not really designed for defensive use. They're just designed to cut, like the traditional ones. Now, you still have the flippers that can, do a dual function. I mean, they get out fast enough. They've got enough blade to do something. I found it. Found it. This was sitting in a box of traditional knives. This is why I did not find it. And it didn't have, in my mind, I pictured a brown, it used to have a brown lanyard on it, but I took it off. So in my mind, I'm looking for a knife with a brown lanyard in my head, So I'm going picture scan when I look for something, I'm just looking, a lot of times I was just looking for a brown lanyard. And I live in a small apartment, so things are going to get cluttered in here. I mean, it's like 500 square feet. You got to have everything you own within that. And that's not easy if you've got like knives, flashlights. I still have a bunch of locks left over from my lock hobby, military gear, mess kits. That volume starts adding up. Anyway, there you go. There's my thoughts on Bowie knives and stuff, and why I think restrictions happen because of people, and it's usually not a good thing. The more people you get, the more restrictions you get, the more basically the less you're allowed to do, because there's one or two bad apples in the group that abused the freedoms that everybody had. Like it was fine until that guy got drunk, pulled out his Bowie knife, and carved up his gambling competitor. And so rather than deal with the guy, let's just make sure that all he's got now, yeah, he can have a knife when he's gambling, but he's not going to do a lot of carving. Anyway, all this is just my ramblings. It's not 100% historically accurate. I'm just guessing and thinking about stuff, from what I've read and seen. And it's not that extensive, so, don't look at this as like a professor's discourse after thorough research and everything. It's just a regular knife person just thinking about this stuff. And why I like Bowie knives is because they remind me of a time when things were a little bit crazier and wild, and it's not necessarily a good time, but it wasn't necessarily a bad time. It had its advantages and disadvantages. If you look back at hygiene in the Old West, man, that's why lifespan was short a lot of times back then, and the lifespan had increased gradually, is because we didn't know things about like cholera and disease and how things spread. And yeah, it was not very hygienic back then. Let's put it that way. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.